Welcome, welcome, welcome. It is Wednesday evening. How are you, Heather?
I am great. Doing
That's good.
wonderful. Yeah.
How's the move? Are you almost done?
Well, we had a bunch of movers here today, so it was a little controlled chaos going on in the house for a while. But man, four guys, and two trailers unloaded in less than 2 hours.
Oh,
So,
that's not bad. That's not bad at
rocking and
all.
rolling. Yeah.
Is that the last leg of it, or you got more?
There's a few little straggling items that are still back in the old house, but we are officially almost all here.
Awesome, 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 awesome. So that's good to know. Anyone who is unfamiliar with the show, or if you are returning, this is How to CPCU. We are put on by volunteers of the CPCU Society. We are here to provide tips, tricks, information, value that's afforded by the Society, opportunities for mentorship and career advancement, and all the good things. So, if you have the opportunity to, please like, comment, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell, retweet, share this out there so that folks can get this information, whether they're in the CPCU Society or if they're prospective CPCUs that are insurance professionals that would like to join us in the Cool Kids Club. So, that being said, we are talking about something that is actually very much a part of getting people into the society as well as keeping them engaged and involved and everything like that. We are talking about CPCU champions. So let me put you on the spot, Heather, and ask you, to you, like in Heather terms, what is a CPCU champion?
I think that any person who is a CPCU can be a CPCU champion.
Hmm.
And it just depends on like what role that you're really willing to take on. CPCU champions to me are people who are advocates for either getting people on the track of earning their CPCU or keeping people engaged in a local chapter or at the international level with the society. They become those big cheerleaders inside of their organizations and within their communities for the CPCU Society.
Mm. Yeah, no, that is a great overview of what it is to be a champion. It's like I would say maybe like another word, but it's not really that accurate. Is kind of like ambassador, right? Like
Mhm.
there's like some part of it that's being an ambassador, especially when you're talking about kind of that interplay between the society or the chapter and the employer. But yeah, it goes way beyond that. I mean, like you can be a CPCU champion who just is like fantastic at mentoring. Like if you're really good at mentoring,
Yeah.
that's considered a champion. Um, so we were talking just before. I believe you don't have necessarily in your chapter a champions coordinator, right?
No, we really don't. And all of our board members, committee chairs, and committee members they're not called champions, but they
Yeah.
serve in that role because
Yep.
they're constantly out there looking for and recruiting people to become more engaged, become more involved, and and then become the advocates inside of their own organizations as
Mm.
well for leadership support, management support, for every single person inside of that company to be able to be a part of the local chapter or participate in some of the international activities that happen as well.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. I would say we kind of have that going on. The issue that we have is so we have like three main employers who are the main supporters of our chapter in New Jersey at the North Jersey chapter. And those three employers, we typically every single year, at least one person from each one of those employers is on our board, like our
Mhm.
senior leaders. So that helps because those people become basically a de facto champion who is working at the different employers to help us find funding or sponsorship for an event, or help us coordinate educational activities or seminars and things like that. And then also herding cats and trying to get the people who are CPCUs from their company to the events and things like that to take
Yeah.
part. uh, where we're trying to work on is we finally have someone who's like a dedicated champions coordinator, because we have a number of other companies that we know there are CPCUs there, and they're either one, members and not involved, or two, they're not even members. And
Yeah.
so we're trying to get someone to help kind of like almost like market to find and identify one point person in each one of those companies to really kind of like open up that line of communication and kind of like get it going. And it's really strange. It's like it's not always the same person. So like um, in some companies it might be the HR person, because if you have someone in HR, they're basically interacting with most everyone pretty regularly. But sometimes it's really strange. It's like it's almost like politics. It's weird. It's like I walk into a town and like you're trying to figure out who the decision maker is, and you come to find out it's like the head of the DPW because he runs the local political party.
Yeah.
That's exactly the way it is with champions in certain organizations and companies. Is you have to find that kind of like glue person that like just knows everyone and like is involved in things like that, and that's like the best person to have because they know everyone's business and the calendar and everything like that and what's going on.
You know,
So
I
yep.
when you say like finding the glue person, if
Mm,
you live in an area that has a large company in it,
right.
and I do, you know,
Yeah.
um, finding that glue person today looks very, very different than it did 5 years ago.
Mm,
Because there's a lot of decentralization of that particular role in an
yep.
organization. It's really spread out in between various business areas for business area decisions. So that may be tough to navigate, and that's why may need multiple people who kind of serve in that role because they have the connection to that particular business area that can make the decisions about people's involvement in your local chapter.
Yep.
And then of course I also sit in Insurance Central around here where we're in the Midwest, and
Yeah.
we've got we have this big college here in town that had the Katie School of Insurance and Risk Management. There is a great need for champions inside of colleges today,
Mm,
especially in those colleges that have insurance and risk management programs in them, because many times the college students are completing parts of their CPCU to get college credit and to be, to kind of be on that track. And a lot of them even end up completing it before they graduate college.
yeah.
So those are incredible opportunities. If you happen to be in an area that has a school, find the person that you need to connect with, the director of the director of that particular school, or maybe the dean of that particular school, and make those connections with your local chapter so that you can help with mentoring and coaching and helping to develop those students as they walk the journey.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, that's a huge. So like you brought up two really big points. The first of which is the what made me think about the decentralized aspect of it is also about the fact that if you rely on just one person to be your main point of contact or your main champion with that employer, what happens tomorrow if they're not there, if they
Yeah.
move, if they,
Win the lottery.
yeah, right. Like I hope, knock on wood. But yeah, if they're not in the picture tomorrow, or if a company, if say you don't have an identified champion, but a company's point of contact is like, whoever one of your senior leaders are with a chapter right now, and that senior leader then retires or moves or something like that, where's the redundancy? Where's the ability to continue that relationship beyond that, or are you just going to have to start over from square one, right? So having those multiple points of contact is really important. The point that you made about the universities is also extremely valuable. I live in a state where we have New York City has dedicated risk management programs in St. John's,
Yeah.
and I think there's one other school that has it. And then Philadelphia is at the tail end of my state that, you have St. Joe's and Temple that are big
Yeah.
risk management schools. And the entire state of New Jersey doesn't really have a school that has like a, full-fledged risk management department or basically division within their
Mhm.
business school. So having those point people has been really critical. So we have one relationship that we're building up with a school in Jersey City by the name of St. Peter's University. And we've had like two or three people on the inside that have been working. And most of these organizations, like a company, are complicated. There's red tape, there's procedure, there's, rings to be kissed and all kinds of other stuff that has to happen. And so having an inside person is uh, paramount. Like you're not going to be able. It's like what's the euphemism? You're trying to roll a boulder up the hill if you don't have someone at the top of the hill, like actually pulling to get it up there, right? So having someone inside of that organization is just imperative. Like you're probably not going to be successful if you don't have someone who's singing the praises of, the organization or the designation on the inside. Um, is that a long-lasting relationship that you have with the university or universities
Oh,
that are there?
yeah, absolutely. In fact, I mean, the director serves on our board with our
Oh,
local
that helps a lot.
chapter.
Yeah.
So, and he's been involved. But we also have like like the student committee chair, like they handle all of the connections that we have with local universities. And we even started up a relationship here recently with University of Illinois as
Yep.
well. Now I don't think they believe that they have they have accounting programs, they have finance programs, they have things like that. They may not have, but they have risk management aspects to them.
Mhm.
So we're like, hey, this is a perfect inroad because, financial services and insurance are so connected to each other.
Yep.
We started up a relationship with them, started up a mentoring program, like a virtual mentoring program with them last year. And that was something that was new for our
Mhm.
chapter to be able to do. We have very long standing relationship though with the Katie School, and that has paid dividends to the chapter because of the engagement that comes out of those students afterwards as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it creates that pipeline, right? Like it's that
Mhm.
pipeline of education to employment to, the designation and the professional association involvement. That's that's like the gold standard that we've been working in New Jersey for years to try and establish. And it's difficult because there's so many steps along that path that you have to have people that are championing and then just consistently trying to like get things put in place to get it all to sync up and work correctly. So yeah, that's been a hell of a task. I'll tell you that much. But
I
so
mean, isn't New York just like right across the river? Like
it
what?
it is it is, and the problem is that all these kids, like I just to go off on a tangent, like when we go to the career fairs and things like that, all of the kids that are like in the business program, they all want to go work for Goldman Sachs and JP
Oh yeah.
Morgan and Citigroup, and it's all staring them in the face, especially the kids who go to school in St. Peter's, because in Jersey City they are literally right across the water. I mean, you could see the Freedom Tower, right?
Hmm.
So they're looking at Wall Street wanting to make, a bajillion dollars a year, and so you have to kind of like compete with that mystique and everything like that. Which, by the way, there's also a ridiculous number of insurance companies that are on,
Hmm.
Avenue of the Americas and things like that in New York as well, which we can steer them in that direction, but I would rather keep them in New Jersey because there's tons of insurance jobs in New Jersey as well. Um, but yeah, I mean, the sales pitch is kind of difficult when they're they think they're all going to be Michael Douglas or
Charlie
Charlie
Sheen.
Sheen
Yeah.
from Wall Street, like in
Yeah.
a couple of years. I just have to hustle for 2 or 3 years and become a multi-millionaire. But yeah, no, I that is like it's an uphill battle. So um, let me ask you about personality types, right?
Yeah.
So, is there an ideal personality type for someone who's going to be a champion at, either an employer or a university or an educational institution?
Yeah. You have to be a connector. You have
Mm,
to be someone who has that ability to be able to connect people and resources and help to coordinate connection a lot of times. I think you don't have to be an incredibly like gregarious, outgoing person to do that, though. I think there's a misconception about the idea of people who fall into that connector personality type.
Yep.
You also have to be somebody who's really good at building relationships with people. You have to be open, you have to be transparent, you have to be able to champion what it is that your chapter or what the CPCU society brings to that business,
Yep.
in order for them to get their head wrapped around the idea of what this is like. Why do I need my software developers to go and do this?
Yeah.
What's the motivation behind that? And I also think that you have to be willing to deal with a little bit of failure too at
Mm.
times, because you're going to run against some brick walls
Yeah.
in a lot of situations, and you have to continue to be able to put the message in front of people. We talk about how you communicate to people and how many times you have to communicate to people so that they absorb the idea that you're really
Yeah.
trying to get in front of them. And that's a sales tactic, honestly, but
Mm-hmm.
you have to be able to say, okay, I didn't win this time, let me make another connection and have a conversation later, and always leave that door open to be able to do that.
Yep.
Even if an area says nah, or a company says no, we're not going to be a part of that, we don't want anything to do with you. Well, why don't I talk to you in about 6 months?
Mm.
Budgets are going to reset about that time. Why don't we chat again in about 6 months? We'll see where you're at. I can bring you everything that this chapter can do for you, what we've done in that 6 months, and help you to see the benefit of
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Um, that's really what it is. And I mean, you can't be bulldogish, with companies, because
Yep.
truly it is an investment for them. It's not a lot,
Mm-hmm.
but it is an investment for them. It's an investment of their people's time a lot more than it is money.
Yep.
And time is so precious today for
Oh,
companies because the resources are stretched incredibly thin. So
oh yeah, definitely. And you're I agree with you on all of those fronts. It's all you have to have the willingness to be able to like ask and hear no, and then go back a little bit later, or try and turn a no into a yes eventually.
mhm.
Um, I was also just kind of like thinking about like the position of the person. Like, does the person have to necessarily be, a senior leader? I would say um, it helps to have at least one point of contact be a senior leader at, it doesn't necessarily have to be C-suite, but if it's someone who's a VP or something, that helps a lot because they're going to be able to open up a lot more doors and just have a lot of personal authority more so than, someone who's entry level. But I would say that if the option arises, like, yes, the more the merrier, right? So like C-suite's fantastic, or if you could have C-suite plus, one or two people that are entry level. Not to mention the fact that the process of being a champion and like advocating for the society and working to like organize things internally within a company, those are all like sales and networking and job skills too that you're also flexing those muscles on that are going to help get you ahead eventually. So, if you do have someone who's entry level, don't necessarily, be like, no, like we're good, like we don't need you, you're not going to be able to do much for us. I think the answer is like the more the merrier in terms of the number of champions that are, at an employer. And if you have that option, yeah, definitely have a senior member because of all those things that come with it. But the other thing to remember is with a senior member, I mean, they may have limited time to be able to pay attention to, the needs of the chapter, the society, and what you're asking of them. So it can help to have, one or two other people that aren't necessarily in that high of a position to be an internal champion. Um, what would you say some of the like at the core, like on a day to day, or I mean, it's not even a day to day job, but like kind of like on a month in, month out basis. Like, what are champions doing? Like, just some examples of things that they're doing internally within their organizations to kind of help, bring the organization closer to the society and also gain support from, the people inside of the company or the employer for, the individuals participating in the society in the chapter.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times those who serve in this role, whether it's formally or informally, within their local communities, um, they're often like a voice back to the society as well. You
Mm,
know, they have their finger on the pulse of what's happening within organizations. Now, obviously, you're not sharing, confidential information that
yeah,
can't
no
be
trade secrets.
broadcasted out, or trade secret information. But if you're aware of something that could impact, like, support for people to be able to be a part of the CPCU society, you bring that back so that the society has the chance to be able to maybe step in and try to, look at what we can do to help to support that relationship better.
Yep.
I think that that's kind of one of the roles as well. They're visible a lot too.
Mm,
They're visible at chapter meetings, or, with various events. The chapter that I'm in, obviously being as large as it is, everybody has, like, we have so many committees, and we have a lot of people with a lot of roles inside of the chapter. And everybody takes on that role. But another piece of it is they make the connections to be able to bring in some of those senior executives that,
mm.
or maybe even just, business area level executives that potentially could speak at events, or, bring that about. We're in the midst of our spring symposium here in Central Illinois, and fantastic events so far. Not trying to champion just my own chapter here, because I know everybody's doing fantastic things out there, but it's a 3-day event, and we've had, executives out of our technology area. We've had we have a senior level executive coming in on Friday to talk as well. And it took somebody being a champion to
Mm.
get those people to come and speak. Now, granted, think about the world we're living in today, Matt.
Yeah,
Okay. The C suite is more accessible than it ever has been in the past.
it's true.
Senior level executives have gotten out of that bubble because they want to know what the world is like out there. They're removing that barrier in between themselves. Plus, we live in a virtual world right now.
Mm.
You can access senior level executives across the country, to bring them in and to garner their support. And once again, that just tells the story of your chapter and your area, when you're able to bring in those kind of that kind of influence,
Yep.
into your group, and then they become the voice. They become champions themselves after they get involved, and they're like, that was such a fantastic event, so much engagement, and I just love being able to talk with these people about this, because they really do want to tell a story.
Yep.
They a lot of times don't have the time, or, they don't have the forum to be able to do that, except inside of their own little company. That world is so open today, and I would highly encourage anybody, that's listening right now, go. Don't be afraid to reach outside of where you're living right now to
Mm.
look for those people, because
Yeah.
that C-suite, it's there's no longer like an iron door on the front of it anymore.
Yes, yeah. I would say, yeah, the propensity might be to stay in that kind of like known area where it's just like, your little team or division or unit or whatever. Um, but I would say champions are definitely the most effective ones are the ones that are, broadcasting outside of just their own little kind of, working group. Uh, and some of the things like, yes, shoot for the moon, like try and get the president or the regional VP or whatever to come and be engaged and stuff like that and turn them into a champion. Um, you can also do really kind of like simple grassroots kind of stuff, right? So some of our folks will, when we have an event, we'll make a printable flyer that they can put up on, granted, this is a question of where you're at in terms of COVID world, but a printable flyer to put up in the break rooms or the conference rooms if there's like an announcement board or something, just to let people know what's going on, or to specifically like the gold standard is if they have like a list of everyone who has the CPCUs within the organization, when an event's coming up, like they internally, they won't just wait for the chapter, email blast to get to those people, they'll actually send an invite to them personally, and also be their point of contact when those people come to the actual event, which is really important. So like if you have a champion who's inviting 4 or 5 people from their employer, that champion's at the event, it's really nice to have them be that like really friendly, face to invite those people that are coming, especially if they haven't been around for a while or this is the first event that they're going to, is always really helpful because it's a nice warm welcome into the organization. And then, they can do the fun little networking game where it's like, oh, let me introduce you to a couple of people. And it's like, hey, Heather, have you met, John? I work with John every day. And, that kind of like starts the conversation and really gets those folks to feel like they're part of the group right from the get-go, which is fantastic. Champions have a tough job. They what are some of the things that they encounter? I mean, there's a lot of resistance along the way when you're trying to advocate for a professional association. Just from your own beats, Heather, like advocating for the society within, your place of business. What's really kind of like the headwinds that you end up facing?
I think a lot of times it's about knowing who is the right person to connect to and at what level in an organization, because you might connect with who you think is the right person and then they're like, well, that's not within my span of control.
Yes.
And I'm not a decision maker about that.
Yep.
And then, as organizations start to decentralize more and put the decisions back into various areas, that's well and good. It's probably a good thing that, a business area drives that particular decision. But then it's like, then the walls go up and there's the silo around that particular area. And you're like, well, it used to be this person that we would talk to, and now we're not quite sure where that falls and, and everything. So you have to be really good at navigating the complexities of organizations and being able to find the right person, especially when you're working with a big company. Smaller companies, I know that we have kind of like it's like a offshoot chapter. I don't know, like a sister chapter or whatever, because they are part of the Central Illinois chapter, but we have we call them the Beyond Bloomington group. And because they're based out of Peoria, and that's more than an hour away from where we are. And a lot of them are not going to travel in to come to meetings, but there's several companies that are around that area. And we actually have we have a director that's over the Beyond Bloomington area, and she's the champion, but she's got like a circle of people around her that help to be able to champion everyone's involvement in CPCU in that area. Now, granted, we have all been brought a lot closer together because we see them all the time now because all of our events are all virtual. That will shift at some point. But you got to look at how do you continue to serve through those times as well. That barriers in organizations are always a challenge to navigate. Those are big things. And then like knowing when to insert yourself into a conversation about what CPCU can do for an organization. Because if you're in the midst of some chaos going on and it's the middle of storm season and claims and they're all running crazy, they're going to be like, yeah, we don't have time for that right now. So you have to be very mindful about your timing with those conversations too. And that could be a challenge at times just because, there's the ebb and the flow and the flux of work and things that come into a company, and business is business. You got to get it done. So,
yes. Yeah. And then all of that is spot on. I think champions also run into the headwind of like, oh, well, we have a limited number of resources. Like I can't, the budget won't, I don't have room in the budget for it. Or so that kind of comes into that like sales part of it where, and here's the other thing, champions don't have to live on an island. Like they don't have to be out on their own and fighting the fight on their own. So I forget what they call it, but Mike Kay used to talk about this all the time. So that Troy, I don't know if Sharon has gotten much of an opportunity to do this with COVID and everything like that. But So the basically the touching base visits that they will come and do. So like, say you're an internal champion and you want your company to, be more supportive of the society and the people in the company that are, engaging in the society or want to engage in the society. You can call in the cavalry, right? Like there's
Mhm.
people that are willing, that are senior members within the society, that are willing to take a trip and come visit. And if I recall correctly, I think it's called champion visits, but I could be wrong. But so they'll actually come and kind of like lay it out on the desk and be like, look, these are the value. This is the value that your employees will draw from this organization, and this is what you can expect in terms of like an ROI and things like that. And they'll lay it out, and they'll also be able to talk from personal experience, in experience that they've had, as well as experience in terms of other companies that have made the move to back and really kind of either incentivize or just approve of employees being part of the society and taking what you were talking about, the time and the energy and things like that, and putting it towards the involvement in the society. Just trying to think. I mean, like, there's obviously other things that come in play. I mean, like, a global pandemic is most definitely something
Yeah.
that I'm sure most people would consider a headwind for, trying to advocate for, involvement in a society. Um, it's also, some of the things are really, really simple too, from the standpoint of just like water cooler talk, right?
Mm.
So like, if and when we do get back to, some semblance of like going into the office and whatnot, I mean, just the coffee break or the water cooler conversations that happen, they carry a lot of weight, and it's a way of also humanizing the organization, because at the end of the day, the other thing that's tough is we can always like talk about the society as this, big collection of professionals and like, buttoned up and tidied and like all these great movers and shakers and things like that. But it doesn't really hit home, because I mean, quite frankly, there's tons of organizations that talk about themselves like that. Where it really hits home is the humanizing aspect of, meeting people and developing friendships and professional relationships, and saying that you've met some so and so, and then the 5 degrees of Kevin Bacon takes over, and you're like, oh my god, I know that person because I met them in this place, like at the CPCU meeting.
Yeah.
um, all of those things kind of come together, where it also helps to like, not everything has to be big. You can kind of like think small in the way that you champion the efforts. HR is an interesting one. It's really weird. So like, you had mentioned, going to someone and you think it's the person, and it might not necessarily
Mhm.
be that person. Like the learning management folks,
Mhm.
and the specific HR folks. I always thought, like, when I first started with the society, that it would be like a slam dunk. Like, oh no, we'll just talk to all the HR people and they'll sell this benefit to the employees for us. Like, it's really easy. But it really isn't. It's just not. I mean, like, internally, well, I don't want you to talk internally about your employer, but I mean, have you had that experience, like, where HR, like, maybe there's one that's like more than willing to kind of like, share the information and get people
Yeah.
going with it, and then most other HR people, like, like, oh, well, just put the pamphlet on the desk and I'll read it later.
I think there's a true trend, and this isn't just in our industry, but in businesses, larger businesses, especially in general, where they're melding their HR and their learning functions together.
Yeah.
So there's an open door opportunity there if that's happening, mainly because then you have like the two voices that you really need, because there is the learning aspect of CPCU.
Mm.
Obviously, it is a professional development program. All right,
Yep.
but then there's the HR support for the benefit piece of it for employees. When you meld those two worlds together, things tend to get down into the track that they need to go, because it's about true talent management in
Yeah.
an organization. And I believe that, there are companies that still have those functions separate from each other, but there are a lot of companies that are bringing them together now, because they recognize how many times that their paths cross each other,
Yeah.
and how they need to be supported by each other. So look for that. That is trending, and it's been going on for a while. Some organizations are slower than others to move into it, but
Yep.
it is something that you can leverage to your advantage, especially if you are a champion. That, hey, I've got the right mix of circumstances to make this science experiment work out.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. No, it's yeah, there's an opportunity. There's definitely an opportunity there because it is like the perfect mix of the two things that the society does really well for its members, which is fantastic. Um, I've also noticed, so like you have to pick your shots in the HR department though. So like
Yeah.
you're not always going to be able to get to the director of HR. If you can, fantastic. But you do have to pick your shots because and and I would also say, or not necessarily pick your shots, but you can't necessarily just rely on one person in the HR department to like do your job for you as a champion. So I mean, they might be tasked with whatever it is, like filling X number of seats as far as employees goes, and that's going to be their number one, priority. If that's their priority, the CPCU Society talk isn't really going to land with them. It's definitely going to be something where they're like, oh, okay, well, that sounds nice. I'll get to it when I want to. But yeah, the learning management or the learning and development folks, I've always found were really receptive. Like they were super receptive to it. The hurdles there were a little bit different. Like the hurdles there were, well, we already signed up with this one, like learning development company, and they're providing us this material. I don't want to necessarily like upset the apple cart and all of a sudden introduce this new stuff or pile on top of these people because they have to do our stuff plus they have to do work, that kind of thing. So you do have to navigate those. Have you seen anything in terms of, I mean, you're a learning development person. Have you seen anything in terms of like learning development budgets? Because I can remember pre-COVID, a
Mm-hmm.
number of companies that I was talking to, they were actually squeezing the learning development budget, which was it seemed counterintuitive to me, but I think at the time the economics of the world was a lot different.
Yeah. You've seen kind of this. You saw the squeeze that happened pre-COVID, and
Hmm.
there was that tightening down, and then now with the pandemic and so much technology and so many innovations, and that the tailwind is behind us right now,
Yeah.
basically for all of that. They've really had to think very differently and open up that budget a little bit more now, I believe. Now granted, it's probably not back in your 1980s 1990s days where we're just going to have all these extravagant expenses. We're going to shove all our employees away at these hugely expensive conferences and develop them in that way so that we don't have to deal with it.
Yeah.
But learning is very different today too, though. There's so much capability for online learning platforms for people that the cost has actually gone down for
Mm.
companies to be able to do this because they're so accessible and
Yeah.
just at your fingertips. The LinkedIn learning options and your degree platforms and Credly, and you'd have to have some subscriptions into those types of things to get the best service out of them. But they have a lot of great free services as well for smaller companies too.
Yeah.
But there's kind of that sense of we have to continue to develop our people, especially in the innovation and technology space. At least increasing what I like to call their digital literacy,
Yeah.
um, because they're not going to be ready for what's going to happen here in the next couple of years as we innovate in so many different ways and we start moving faster and faster and faster, as,
Yeah.
as companies. So I would say you saw that squeeze. It's starting to broaden back up, but also the expense of things have started to go down a little bit too.
Mm. Yeah. No, that's a really good point. And um, it's also, with the ability for us to virtually interact, it's also become what I would perceive as less of a hard sell to get companies to buy into being involved in the society because, you know, um, to your point, back in the 80s and 90s, whereas you would normally have to send someone to an expensive conference or something like that, going forward, or even as of recently as this past year, I mean, there's been virtual options. So you can, be involved in the organization without having to be, plunk down, $5,000 every single year to go to the annual meeting or anything like that. And I think into the future, that some of that's going to still stick around. So, I would expect there to be hybrid options to get involved in some of these events, which means that the hurdle that you have to get over is lower in terms of pitching your employer or your company on advocating for, or at least being open to employees taking part in society events and functions and things like that. um, I mean, quite frankly, like, you get the most value by being there in person, but a little bit of value is better than none. Uh, but that's I think that remains to be seen. It's going to be whether or not we come back and that mix looks more like 50-50, where you used to get 2,000 people, now you get 1,000 in person, and 1,000, maybe even 2,000 virtually, and get better turnout. But you only have 1,000 people at the venue. um, I think that remains to be seen, but yeah, I think that hurdle's a little bit lower now in terms of having to sell a company on involvement and whatnot.
Yeah.
Um, I let me kind of pivot a little bit and think about, all right, so you're set up, you have someone identified as, either they're already identified as a champion, or you kind of be like, okay, this person would be a great champion, right? How do you get them nurtured to the point where they're inside running and gunning, trying to help the cause, so to speak, right? Like, you might have kind of identified, all right, Sally, I think, is fantastic. She has a great personality. She's in a good spot within, XYZ insurance company or employer or whatever. And we think that she'd make a great champion. What has to be done in order to kind of cultivate that person from just being identified as a champion to kind of like, pushing them off in the boat and be like, go, like, swim?
I mean, I think it's all about being very intentional about the support that you provide them to get them onboarded into what the role is,
Mm,
and really immerse them to understand exactly what it is that your chapter does to bring value to
yeah,
that organization. And then also elevate that so that they understand what the International Society does for their organization, because a lot of times people get immersed into just the chapter aspect and then forget that we have this great gigantic group that's all around us,
yes,
around the world, and they don't really see beyond the lens of the city that they live in. So they need to be someone who you're going to mentor along through that, and bring them into board meetings, bring them in, let them kind of chat with some of the other committee members that are on various committees, have some time where they can shadow somebody that's done it, maybe. And
yeah,
maybe you don't really truly have all the resources for that. There are creative ways around that.
yeah,
If you have someone who is serving that role already, you need to connect your new person to that person. And even if they're doing it in another organization, they can at least get that person like upskilled on what's the best practices that work here, and then maybe you try to help them to figure out how to translate that into the organization that Sally's sitting in at this time. So,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I think mentorship is a big part of it. I would say, get them as much information as you can in terms of the local chapter. Hopefully, they're familiar and know the inner workings. But if they don't, make sure, include them in the leadership meetings and get them as much information as they need to in order to understand the value that's held at the local level, and then provide them resources and information so that they understand, if they haven't been active at the international level of the society, just what's going on. It is tough to understand if you haven't necessarily been involved with it, but that's part of the reason why we do this show. So I would
Hint,
think,
hint, we got a lot of videos about this.
so I would think part of that cultivating or that maturing process should be to watch How to CPCU is a really good prescription for that. So well, that's all I got. I mean, this is kind of a short episode. It seems cut and dry. I think the art is in how it's deployed and really kind of like managed, or not managed, but how it's set up and kind of planned out, so to speak. I think that's the other thing, is have a plan, right? Like, don't just, I mean, you're lucky in that you have like a ton of people that are in these leadership positions throughout your entire chapter, and then they go back to their employers and they're in leadership positions there potentially, and that that just kind of like cultivates itself almost. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you're in a smaller chapter and you want to get something like this done, or if you're in a chapter that maybe has had some issues in the past and you're trying to revitalize it or revamp it, have a plan. Like, identify someone to coordinate what's going on and kind of keep track of your champions and make sure that they're getting communicated with, especially if they can't make it to leadership meetings and whatnot. And actively identify new champions. That's the other thing, is like, it's the same mantra as sales. Yep. You never stop trying to find or cultivate new salespeople, regardless of how big your sales force is, because someone's always going to leave. If you want to grow, you need new people. Like, so you always need to be recruiting and cultivating new champions to help spread the just the good word, right? Like, of what's going on and everything like that. So, any final thoughts as far as champion coordinators or anything like that?
No, I would just say, just as it is with your board and your committee work and everything, succession planning is so incredibly important, because this role will never go away. And I will tag on that to say, as businesses start reimagining what they're going to look like in the future, where people are working, what type of roles they may be in an organization, this role is going to be crucial to keep engagement inside of those organizations, because you're going to have people in a lot of different type of working circumstances now. There's been many insurance companies out there that have publicly broadcast all of our employees are working from home for now. Yep. So that looks very, very different than I walk through, this side of the building and I'm standing by the water cooler and I'm talking to all these people about something. Those interactions are very different. We've gotten a lot better at that world than we were a year ago. Yeah. But it's still, it's still so important to make sure that that role is going to look, even the champion role is going to look a little bit different because of the way insurance companies are evolving today, and how they're reimagining how they're going to move their business forward, and where people work and where they go, and who's in what location. And so your connection might change too as well if you happen to be a champion. It's just something that I think will be incredibly crucial to continue engagement in the society. So if you're not a champion today, go for it.
Yes. Yeah. Become a champion tomorrow, at least. Well, so that's it. Another great episode in the books. Thank you, Heather. We will be back next Wednesday at 5:30. We have a couple of interest groups that we are lining up to do a couple more profiles on those folks. We have one already lined up for, I believe, the 28th. So that's in 2 weeks. We're trying to figure out whether or not we'll have another one for next week, or if they will, we'll have to push them back to the start of May. But we will have a fantastic episode next week as well at 5:30 on Wednesday. So don't you worry. As usual, like, comment, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell, retweet, send this back out there. And that's all I got. Have a good evening, Heather.
All right. Thanks, Matt.